Let's keep the conversation going now. I'm joined on set with a great panel. Washington Post Live anchor Leigh Ann Caldwell, Democratic strategist and president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, Navin Nayak, and Republican strategist and former NRCC communications director, Matt Gorman. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. So we were going to bed last night thinking it's 5 weeks until Election Day, and then everything was upended in Georgia. Leigh Ann, set the stage for us. There are bombshells and then there are bombshells. How big of a deal is this in the Georgia race, which is critical to Republicans' math if they want to win back the Senate?
It's an absolutely critical race. I don't think it's clear yet how much of a bombshell this is going to have on the voters in Georgia. We're going to have to wait to see. There's a couple philosophies here. Some Republicans are telling me maybe this is a death by 1,000 cuts, that maybe it's not this issue, but it's all these scandals putting together that might hurt him. They just don't know yet. But you have to also remember the circumstances in Georgia. Georgia has now, post Dobbs, a 6-week ban in Georgia. So there is a lot of limitations for women in Georgia regarding abortion. Meanwhile, the anti-abortion groups are standing with Hershel Walker. I reached out to them today, and they say that as long as he denies it, they do not believe it. And it doesn't matter because his policies are anti-abortion. And so they're more concerned about not what people are doing in their private life, but what sort of policies they are imposing on other people in these political races.
That's such an interesting constituency to get reaction from, and an important one, Leigh Ann. Matt, you've obviously advised past campaigns. What does the Walker campaign need to do to survive this? And can they, and are we in a different moment? I mean, to go back to this idea in the pre-Trump era, we would say this is game over, but not anymore.
I think they took the first step in denying it. And look, I think it's important to keep a little perspective. I think we tend to be very hyperbolic in the first 24 hours of these sorts of things. As you just said, there's 5 weeks to Election Day. I think what you need to do is, look, it's October. You got to ride this out, go full steam ahead, and move forward. I also think that post-Trump especially, we tend to live in pretty polarized and partisan times, to say the least. And unless you're Joe Manchin, unless you're Susan Collins, people tend to put their jerseys on. And I think one other part of this is, we talk about Brian Kemp. He has a fairly comfortable lead, at least mid-single digits in the governor's race. So I would expect him to lift Hershel Walker at least a little bit. I think he'll pull it out. It'll certainly be tight, but I think the Kemp lead is also really crucial here.
Navin, what are you hearing?
I think the issue that's really frustrating for, I think, Republicans in this case, and I think encouraging, is we're talking about abortion again. The entire national conversation. So, yes, there's an impact in Georgia itself, and who knows how that plays out. But the national conversation has come back to the fact that Hershel Walker, Lindsey Graham, national Republicans are pushing for a 15-week ban, a national ban for everyone. And so I think there's that element of it. And then there's obviously the character element that is specifically damning for him.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point, which is that abortion has been durable as a central issue in all of these races. We don't know ultimately how it's going to impact a race like this. But I guess the question is, Leigh Ann, as you're talking to Democrats, there's a question about whether they are focused too much on this issue. Certainly, this is something that matters to the Democratic base and to a large swath of Americans. But there's a question about whether they are talking enough about other issues that are at the top of voters' minds, like the economy, like inflation. It's certainly something that President Biden spends a lot of time talking about. But based on your conversations, is there a concern that Democrats run the risk of a backlash, particularly in a moment like this, where you see Republicans galvanizing around Walker?
It depends on what Democrat you're talking to, and it also depends on where this Democrat is from and where they're focused. But there is an acknowledgement from Democrats that there are, in fact, 2 different campaigns that are being run. Democrats are running a campaign on abortion. Republicans are running a campaign on crime and the economy and immigration as well, too. So, you know, which voters are voters going to identify with one side or the other? As far as this abortion in Georgia is concerned, is this going to continue to turn off moderate women, or is this going to keep some of these very conservative women home? we're going to have to see what sort of impact it has.
It was notable to see what Raphael Warnock did or did not say about this, Navin. He said, quote, "We are full speed ahead in Georgia. This election is about the future of the country. Hershel Walker will make things better." Oh, I'm sorry. This is actually a quote not from him. That's from Hershel Walker. He says, "I'll let the pundits decide how they will impact the race. But I've been consistent in my view that a patient's room is too narrow and cramped for space for a woman and the government." Is that a smart reaction from Raphael Warnock to let this essentially play out and for him to stay focused on the issues?
I think absolutely. And I think he should lean in on this issue, which is that the Republican Party is taking away a fundamental freedom from women in this country and putting politicians and the government inside a very personal decision that women make with their doctors. And I think that's the conversation. And to your other point, I would say that, I think the thing Democrats are going to do over the last 35 days is use abortion as the most powerful proof point of what's happened to the Republican Party overall, which is they have radicalized when it comes to voting and turning over elections and the willingness to, encourage political violence. They have radicalized. You have the head of the NRCC saying we should privatize Social Security or put it on the chopping block every 5 years. There's a lot of different proof points, but I think abortion remains the central one to that argument.
And let me read fully now this statement that we got from Hershel Walker. "We're full speed ahead in the campaign. This election is about the future of the country. Hershel Walker will make things better. Raphael Warnock is making it worse. Anything else is a distraction." Do you think that that is a smart way to address this, Matt?
Look, I think you have to, again, deny it and move forward. Again, I think to the point also, again, Brian Kemp signed that 6-week ban into law, and he's up mid-single, if not more digits against Stacey Abrams, who's, you can argue, but some say she's a fairly formidable candidate for governor. And look, let's face it also, Democrats have been talking a lot about abortion, as we've said here, that the main thing they're talking about, and yet you still see Republicans poised to certainly win back the House, and I think they're poised to win back the Senate. So it's really not a fight over the answer to a question, but the question itself about this midterm is going to be about.
Yeah.
Well, I have two quick things on that. One is Democrats have no business being in this midterm, right? History suggests that Republicans should be running away with this midterm. It's a 50-50 Senate, and we're still 35 days out talking about whether Republicans could win. It's a 5-seat majority in the House, and Republicans are still anxious about. So, they've really blown this election from the perspective of it should have been over by now.
Blown this election, we're going to win the House and the Senate,
but it's likely. So
let's easy with the blow.
But it
and also,
it really shouldn't have been a debate.
The NRCC had never called for the end of Social Security. That's factually wrong.
No, but the NRSC has.
NRCC never.
But the NRSC, the head of Rick Scott, has put out a plan. And he is the one fundraising for candidates that calls for ending Social Security every 5 years.
Matt, final point, and then I'm going to go to Leigh Ann to jump in.
No, look, I think, again, it's going to be a question of what this midterm's about. Democrats have talked a lot about abortion. Republicans still have a lead. The economy seems to be #1 issue on voters' minds.
Yeah. And this also comes back to candidate quality. The reason Hershel Walker is the candidate is because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the reason that Republicans lost the Senate last time around, and Donald Trump once again could be the reason Republicans lose the Senate this time around too.
I want to ask you guys about something because we are almost out of time. There's new reporting overnight that President Biden is more definitively telling some of his allies that he does, in fact, plan to run for president again. And in fact, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre just reiterated that during her briefing. Navin, what do you make of that? And I've interviewed a lot of Democrats and tried to get them on the record. Is that what they want to see? Do they want to see President Biden run again? A number of them kind of dance around the issue.
No, to me, there's no question. I think there's going to be a really powerful story. This president has gotten more done on the economy than any president in my lifetime. If you look at what the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act, on that issue alone, which we know is the central concern for voters, I think there's going to be a really powerful story to tell. And on every other issue, he really is positioned where voters are.
And Matt, what's looming large over all of this, of course, is former President Trump going to run again? As Leigh Ann says, his name looms over everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's certainly, as of right now, polls see could be a Donald Trump-Joe Biden rematch and come back in a couple of years. So we'll see. The Dems don't have much of a bench, and Biden's going to be asked the day after Election Day if he's going to run. He needs an answer.
He sure is, and both of them will be out on the campaign trail. Thanks, you guys. Great conversation. Really appreciate it, Leigh Ann, Navin, and Matt.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.